Hi, everyone. It's been on my mind for a bit to make a video about the therapeutic use of nesting dolls. And so I'm here to chat a little bit about how this has become one of my favorite tools, especially in the world of attachment and trauma work, where I spend the majority of my time. And as you'll see in a moment, I have some helpers just off screen that are going to be helping to make all that happen. uh, Nesting dolls are, ancient. They've been around for hundreds of years, invented in China and Japan, and used for really sacred reasons, and then finding their way over to Russia to be created in a manner that we're most familiar with seeing um, in everyday therapy offices. But they have branched out to have so many different designs and so much potential. And just want to highlight some modern uses, modern therapeutic uses for this really ancient art form. So, for one, just having nesting dolls in your general playroom will be on its own therapeutic. It facilitates so much discovery and so much delight when children are able to see how many dolls can be contained within one. Lots of playful engagement, and then even for adults, having them out in your adult therapy space leaves you a lot of room for just the metaphor being ever present there with you. But specifically in the world of attachment and trauma, there are even some reasons that you might reach for some teaching opportunities to help discuss parts of self, to help explain dissociatively held neural nets and how that plays out in the nervous system following some people's experience of trauma, being able to talk about ego states and then the attachment concept of younger self being held within older selves. And so you have so much potential for direct and indirect teaching. And as we as play therapists know, those are two of the powers of play that we always have available to us. A lot of the inspiration for me in using this tool comes from the Attachment and Trauma Center of Nebraska. They've done such a great job of bringing forward ways to talk to younger selves, or to use the nesting dolls as an entry point to get to discussions and play behaviors about what babies need, so that some of those wounded younger parts of self are able to get attention and get welcomed into the therapeutic process. But there's so many techniques that you could really pull them into. Uh, my favorite, of course, as many of you know, is Sandtray. I use Sandtray for so many things, and so whenever possible, having a variety of nesting dolls that match your different categories of Sandtray miniatures allows then for the client to choose for this representation of different ego states or parts of self with as much metaphorical distance as they need. So it's one thing to choose for a human nesting doll that's a little closer to self, and another to reach for animal or even objects. And so it gives you range of externalization and distance as needed to make contact with those more wounded and vulnerable parts of self. But then you also have different sizes of nesting dolls that, compared to one another, can be metaphors on the shelves as well. So I just want to show you what some of these different categories might look like, and then talk to you very quickly about a couple of techniques to help get your wheels turning about ways you may want to use this really lovely art form and tool. Okay, so I'm going to switch to a second camera in just 1 second, and you'll be able to see into my sand tray, and my daughter Janelle is going to be helping us out. You can see a whole range of nesting dolls there, from spiritual nesting dolls that might be a nativity to pull for Christian themes. Then we have angel and devil, both in the tray. I've even seen clients take these and layer them inside of one another to have very different representations, like, younger selves being angelic, and then the layers of self-protection existing inside a bigger kind of quote unquote devil parts of self. And people groups are really important to consider. There are some that nesting dolls that are going to look more like your traditional nesting doll people. The bigger ones like Janelle just touched, and then right beside that are two smaller versions of traditional looking nesting dolls. You can also go more towards realistic, because there are many different um, types of people that exist within this one um, nesting doll. And so then you not only get representation and variety, but then the metaphor of different parts of self even being able to be illustrated through the different ways that the people look, different ages, different skin tones, different genders. So it's a really great tool, all-in-one tool. I like this one quite a lot. As we look at other kinds of people, you would just want to be thinking about making sure that different people groups are represented just in the way that you would in your Sandtray categories themselves. We don't want all of one skin tone being prominent on our shelves. And so, as Janelle will highlight, there are a couple of um, different looking people from one, yeah, it's right there, one that's larger, and that one's really beautiful. And then one that more represents an indigenous look. And then we have people that would be less traditional looking, that would move more towards character. Ninja would be one of those, and then even like fantasy characters, like the Harry Potter ones that are up front. Love these. Harry Potter is one of my favorite teaching tools because it has so much attachment and trauma healing themes within the books. So that a couple of colleagues and I have ongoing Harry Potter book clubs for therapists where we talk about attachment themes. And then having a tool like this that could accompany that bibliotherapy approach, where we get to see um, Harry, then Hermione, and then Ron, Hagrid, and then little Hedwig down there as the smallest. But then we have animals as well that we would want to think about. So some animal nesting dolls would look really playful, like in the back, the big orange one. Um, that's kind of a lion shape. And then the one right in front of that, Janelle, the penguins, very, very playful. In the back left corner, we have a gentle panda. Then some more realistic looking animals like the elephants and the lions that Janelle's going to show you. That can look more protective and pull for those protector figures, that lion in the front, because then we can see another way that the metaphor can work with parts of self. Um, that lion has inside of it, a cousin of sorts that is a tiger. And these are beautifully painted. I love the lion and tiger. But then inside the tiger, we have one more surprise, and it's a gentle looking like kitty cat. And so from the lion, we go to the more vulnerable figure inside. And so, as you might imagine, that metaphor sits right there for you. And then we have vegetation in the back. As you see, there's a tree that's shaped like a Christmas tree, but there are other tree nesting dolls. And then a couple more I want to highlight is there's some blank wooden ones that can be custom painted. So if you want to do some artwork with a client, and then that art becomes its own tool that gets to be used individually by that client. And then there's the white set that can be drawn on with dry erase markers, and so that then it easily comes off. So that's a range of what different nesting dolls could look like. Now what I'm going to do is switch back over to my camera for a minute and tell you just about a couple of techniques. Change as then you come back to me. Just a couple of ways to think about using these in the sand in particular is the nesting doll itself could become a prompt. And so you could just invite the client to choose any set of nesting dolls they're drawn to, and then just say, whatever world is inspired by that set of nesting dolls, by that choice, by those set of objects, create a world. And so it could be a generic, less directive prompt, or you can invite the client to choose a set of nesting dolls, line them up from smallest to largest, and create a Sandtray world that's more of a timeline. Another way that I've used them as a prompt is to do a traditional EMDR safe place, safe, calm, comfortable place, and then to make sure that all younger parts of self that get pulled by bringing the nesting doll in feel equally safe in this place. And if not, does their safe place need to be adjusted, or do they need to make a second one for the younger parts of self? Nesting dolls in the sand can also be used as containment. And so if there are things at the end of session that need to be held and held in a more relational, protected way than just a blank box as a container, then we can write the note, we can write what we need to be held and contained and put it inside one of the set of nesting dolls before the client leaves to be held. You just have to remember to remove it right before the next client comes in. You can also just use it more for imagination. So you don't have to write a note. It could just be taking what's inside that's still activated and needs to be held by another and moving it over to imagining it going inside the nesting doll. It can also be used in Sandtray processing. So if we start to get stuck in Sandtray world processing, just inviting a set of nesting dolls over and seeing which size of the nesting doll had done the talking about this world primarily, and what would it be like to listen to a bigger part of self or a younger part of self, and see what part of the world they're drawn to. Or just asking which age of self needs to speak for this created world, and using the nesting dolls there as a kind of a reminder, a concrete reminder of which part of self is currently speaking. Even if during the processing of a tray, if you notice a nervous system shift towards either towards what seems to be more rooted in safety or into self-protection, the nesting dolls can help to show shifts in the nervous system, so the clients are just getting more self-awareness of what's happening in their mind and body as they're doing the work of processing the sand tray. And then of course, I'm going to throw in poetry. If you wanted to then surround that with allowing each size of nesting doll to make a comment about the world in closing, then capturing those and letting them be their own nesting doll inspired poetry that came in response to processing any completed tray. So those are just a few techniques in response to looking at a different sampling of available nesting dolls. I hope you find this helpful. You can, connect with me more through the website, marshallowns.com. If you have questions about that, or you want to see more of what some nesting dolls can look like, you can head over to marshallsminiatures.com and look at some of those. All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.